Opal Talon was a magnificent specimen of a dragon, and everyone knew it. Exhaling an artful plume of fire, she touched down on the clearing outside Backbreaker's mine. Her white scales glistened in the morning sun. She arched back on her haunches, cracking her long neck as she looked around. Backbreaker had done the bare minimum to make the place presentable. A handful of disemboweled heads resting on pikes, a few tastefully arranged shrubberies. The grass in the clearing, admittedly not overgrown, but so patchy and thin where she had landed that it seemed as though a herd of sheep had been allowed to graze there for too long. But that could be overlooked. Perhaps. The entrance to the mine gave the impression of being untouched from the days when Backbreaker had first seized the place from humans. Bare timbers and mud bricks, and next to the entrance an uninspired hitching post, complete with a scrawny, terrified horse attached to an empty wagon. Humans could hardly be blamed for having no sense of style, but the same could not be said for dragons who were supposed to be independent adults. Should she eat the horse? It was doing its best to tear itself away from its hitch, but it wasn't going anywhere. However, it would probably kick her when she got close to it, which would be annoying. And she had already breakfasted. She would do well to be more disciplined about snacks between meals. She sighed audibly and stooped to make her way into the mine. Backbreaker greeted her in the central hall, which was wide with vaulted ceilings and pleasant lighting. He was a bit of an odd bird. His introductory dance was off-putting and stiff, as though his hips and shoulders were too tight to move separately. When he wasn't staring at her with his mouth open, he liked to apologize for things that needed no apology, and he insisted on following her around rather than leading her through the premises. But she did appreciate the bright redness of his scales, and the amount of treasure he had accumulated. She had never seen so much treasure in one place. She had never seen half as much. And he seemed to have other treasure rooms behind closed doors that he wasn't even bothering to show off. When it came to arranging his piles, he had very poor taste. But if a lady had to come to a place like this occasionally, she could spend some time and spruce things up a bit, add a bit of elegance here and there to make life less drab. In the meantime, it would be nice if he would stop following her around so closely. She could feel his breathing. It was expectant. The time eventually came to inspect the bower. They entered the room together, but naturally parted ways when she saw the pièce de résistance he had prepared. Backbreaker split off to the left, mounting the connubial heap. Opal Talon followed her eye to the princess he kept in a little custom-made cage. The ground around the cage was clear, so it was possible to come right up and peer very close. She stretched a single talon through the bars to prod. The blood she drew from the princess's arm was the same color as the woman's thick, flowing hair.
"Oh, she's just beautiful,"
said Opal Talon.
"Did you say she was a duchess?"
Up on his heap, Backbreaker leaned back and flared out his keel with pride.
"A princess, the king of Etterwick's oldest daughter,"
he said.
"Very impressive. Is it difficult to maintain her plumpness?" "I have a contract with the king. He sends servants with food." "Very clever,"
said Opal Talon.
"Occasionally I keep one to eat for later. I think I have a few tied up in the back if you'd like a bite." "Maybe later. I just ate before I came here." "Oh, I'm sorry,"
said Backbreaker.
"Sorry for what, dear?" Nothing, sorry."
Opal Talon flared her nostrils and bared her teeth in a grin. Of course he was nervous, with a lady dragon like her to impress. She should treat it as a compliment. And it was a massive heap, wasn't it? Even in dim light, it glittered in the way that only mounds of gold interlaced with gemstones can. She crept around the room to see how far back it went. Noting its outstanding girth, she caught sight of Backbreaker's tail, which he was using to encircle the peak of the heap in the traditional way. Was that all there was? Her nostrils closed shut in involuntary disgust. Maybe his tail seemed so small because the treasure was piled so extraordinarily high. No, she might be able to tell that to someone else, but she couldn't lie to herself. In the pathetic way he had seen her reaction and repositioned himself, darted his undersized tail to the other side of the pile so that some of it was out of her view. He knew. He had carefully positioned himself through the whole interaction, angling out of view or squaring their bodies as she looked around. He knew his own inferiority. He had led her on a grim charade. She felt a growing nausea in the pit of her true stomach. She had nearly allowed herself to consider breeding with this thing. She forced her nostrils to reopen. The air in the room now felt suffocating.
I just remembered that I have another very pressing appointment,
she said.
I hope you'll forgive me. I'm so terrible with my schedule. We'll have to do this another time.
Backbreaker blinked twice.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that,
he said.
When would you like to reschedule? What time works for you?
Opal Talon had already turned toward the exit.
Let me get back to you,
she said.
So sorry to be so abrupt.
She thanked the gods that he let her leave without further protest. Backbreaker burst into the pantry, sobbing, spilling hot tears on the ground. He looked at the two servants he had bound and gagged for the occasion. They writhed and strained. They made muffled noises, probably attempts at screaming. He picked up the noisier one and bit off his head. He would have offered that one to Opal Talon, not that she deserved it. He normally enjoyed the head the most, but now it tasted like ashes in his mouth. The other servant became very still, just watching him as he ate. Well, let him watch. Let him see what it looks like when a dragon is suffering.
You think it's easy to be a dragon, little man?
Asked Backbreaker.
Let me tell you, a dragon's life is nothing but misery. Misery punctuated by occasional, fleeting moments of triumph.
He bit another gamey piece off the servant, taking one of the upper arms and a fair portion of the chest into his mouth.
You have no idea what it's like to not be judged on your own merits, to have your legacy determined by something entirely out of your control.
He bit off the dead servant's other shoulder.
I don't think you even realize what I'm talking about. Did you know that the size of a dragon's tail mattered to the mating ritual? A thing so utterly useless and inconsequential? You can lose the whole tail and fly just fine, just as straight, just as fast. You can't use it to grip anything. It's too weak to smash anything. It is for display. You are supposed to waggle it, fetchingly. Like this, watch.
Backbreaker waggled his little tail.
Fetchingly, from your heap. And the lady dragon likes to look at how big your tail looks against the heap. That's it. That's what it's for. And because mine is small, I will die alone and without offspring. You have no idea what that's like. Did you imagine that dragons were so petty and so stupid?
The servant seemed to say something, but Backbreaker couldn't make it out. He slid a talon under the servant's gag to slice it open, cutting the man's face in the process. I did not, said the servant.
Obviously not,
said Backbreaker.
Who could imagine that such a magnificent beast could actually be so small and ugly in its preferences?
Backbreaker turned the dead servant around and bit off its lower legs. While chewing, he peered closely at the live servant, waiting for an answer. It's bizarre, said the servant.
Bizarre? Yes. It's absolutely bizarre. That's what it is. I should have these ladies converse with some humans so they'll have some sense talked into them.
The servant said nothing. He seemed somehow uncomfortable.
Do you know why I have such a small tail? First of all, it's not even that small. It's actually fine. It does the job. These ladies' standards are so inflated these days that they'll only accept a dragon with an oversized tail. And who knows, I probably actually would have had a massive tail. Do you realize that this isn't even the tail that I was born with? I lost my tail in the first feast.
The servant said nothing. Backbreaker ate some more, waiting for the servant to be polite and ask the obvious follow-up question. Could a servant be expected to have manners? A servant could not.
You are not curious about how I lost my tail in the first feast?
I do not know the reference, said the servant.
The reference to what?
Asked Backbreaker. The first feast.
The first feast? Maybe you call it something else. It is when you hatch out of your egg and eat all your brothers.
What?
When you are born.
Said Backbreaker. You eat all your brothers? Asked the servant.
I'm sure you do the same thing, you probably just don't remember. I forgot that you were born out of your mother's womb, so your egg hatches inside her. How many humans are born at once? Dozens?
One, usually, said the servant. Sometimes two.
So you must have the first feast inside your mother, then. A pity that you don't remember it. I remember the first feast like it was yesterday. It comes before sight, fighting your way out of the eggshell, all the while feeling this incredible, insatiable ravening for food, and the utterly delicious taste of finding the first egg to relieve your hunger. There is nothing like that experience anywhere else in the world. I've had the occasion to taste dragon's eggs more recently.
You eat dragon's eggs?
I won't get into the details, but the opportunity presented itself,
said Backbreaker. He took another bite of the dead servant.
It wasn't the same. The world was new then, and my hunger was all-consuming. I didn't even know what I was eating or where I was. I was all instinct and pain, a blind, howling stomach, and claws, and the incredible pleasure of eating.
You can never go back, said the servant.
What's that?
It's a saying we have. It's like another saying. You can never step in the same river twice. It isn't the same river and you aren't the same man. Backbreaker wiped the remaining tears off his face with the back of his claw.
That's very profound,
he said.
We have a similar saying. A brother's egg tastes best.
They shared silence. The servant piped up. You didn't tell me how you lost your tail, he said.
Of course. You distracted me with your philosophy. What you have to understand is that our females hatch first. The mother prepares a nest with a high wall, and the little ladies come out of their eggs blind and hungry days before the males. The proud mother swoops them up and takes them to visit her female relatives so she can show them all off. They all get fed and they all survive. Meanwhile, she might take a fortnight to come back to her precious male babies. You can't imagine the lies that a mother will feed her surviving males upon her return. She wants to wait as long as possible so that she hasn't starved them all to death. Yet they are so hungry that they have been forced to cannibalize each other. Ideally, she waits until the whole brood is eaten so only one remains. The strongest. Her champion.
Oh my, said the servant.
But will she tell her survivors that she's pitted them against one another so as to not bother having to feed any inferior specimens? Hardly. She will go on and on for days, weeks, about how unfortunate it was that she had been delayed and had to be away from them for so long at such a critical time. How much her thoughts had always gone back to them. How proud she was that they had the wherewithal to make it on their own despite everything. I think I need some wine to wash down this meal,
said Backbreaker. He fiddled with one of the kegs against the wall, opening its spigot and letting it all empty out down his throat before he continued speaking.
As I was saying, my mother could barely contain her disappointment when she returned to find that there was not one champion, but 3. See if you can imagine this. Your first visual memory, the first image you ever see, is fighting with one brother and getting the best of him, but then immediately being attacked from behind by another, and watching them fight over your beautiful red tail as you stagger away. But you can't get away. There is a high wall that you can't climb over, and you haven't learned how to fly. You are trapped there. And my weaker brothers were strengthened by eating my tail. I'm drinking more wine.
Backbreaker ate some more dead servant and fiddled with another spigot, then downed the keg. The live servant watched.
My precious mother called us all her little champions, of course, but she could not bring herself to look at me for very long, with my nub for a tail. It grew back, but weak, like my brother's.
Backbreaker finished the rest of his servant and looked around for more wine. He struggled to open up one spigot, but ended up smashing the keg to splinters in an attempt to grip it properly. He went to the next and did the same. The wine sloshed around in a puddle on the floor. "Do you want me to help you?" asked the servant.
You know, that's a good idea,
said Backbreaker.
I think I've gotten too drunk to open these kegs.
Backbreaker sliced open the servant's restraints, cutting him again a bit in the process. The man held his limbs gingerly, then stretched and went to the nearest keg. "This wine is spiced," said the servant. "It was specifically for the princess, but I think you'll like it."
You're a good friend,
said Backbreaker. He downed the whole keg. "I didn't realize how hard life is for dragons," said the servant.
You know,
said Backbreaker.
I was going to eat you tonight, but I think I'll let you share some of my wine instead, and we can talk some more. Maybe you can fix me some of this beef that's lying around, and some cheese.
"Of course," said the servant.
What's your name, little man?
asked Backbreaker. "Reginald." Backbreaker let Reginald serve him food and spiced wine, and they talked into the night. They spoke of Backbreaker's worthless brothers, who had both fathered multiple broods despite never having acquired a third of the heap that Backbreaker had, even if you put both of their hauls together. They spoke of Backbreaker's bad luck with lady dragons. Opal Talon's sudden flight was the latest insult, but in some ways the stupidity of his own mother still stung most. For his own mother to pity him, to find him disgusting and weak when he was obviously her strongest. It galled him. Lady dragons were responsible for the fate of their kind and had no judgment in the slightest. They spoke of the latest campaign against Etterwick. The king had raised 2 armies to recover his daughter, and Backbreaker had destroyed both easily. Then foreign princes started coming, and each met the same fate. His fire, his claws, the impenetrable armor of his scales. He discussed his favorite tactics: swooping, lying in wait, picking up 2 knights and smashing them against one another to kill them, then dropping them from a great height to crash like bombs amongst their allies. And his negotiations, allowing the king to send provisions in return for Backbreaker agreeing not to lay waste to the countryside. The king could also send 1 suitor a month to attempt to kill him. Backbreaker liked to decorate the premises with their heads. He felt sorry that it was no longer princes that came to win the princess. Dukes had been replaced by earls, earls by barons, and lately barons by prominent knights. At the rate this was going, it was becoming almost embarrassing to stay in the mine. But this sort of thing was inevitable. You have to switch jobs to keep moving up in the world. Soon he would need to start scouting the next kingdom. No rest for the weary, as they say. As the night went on, Backbreaker kept coming back to his central pain, the root of all the later suffering. Mommy always thought she knew which of them was weakest. Reginald didn't have much to add, but he proved an excellent listener. Eventually, Backbreaker dozed off, secure in the knowledge that he had at least one friend that understood him, even if he wasn't a dragon. Sir Reginald waited until he was sure Backbreaker was fully asleep, then found the biggest kitchen knife he could and stabbed the dragon through the vents in his skull dozens of times. Backbreaker never moved once, the poppy-spiced wine having done its work. After making quite sure that the dragon was truly dead, and not about to wake up in a spastic, fire-breathing rage, Sir Reginald began butchering the carcass. He carved out the eyes and a tooth as keepsakes, then wrestled with the neck to loosen some scales. A few inches at a time, he revealed enough unprotected skin so that he could slice into the muscle. It took hours for him to get the head separated from the body. He repeated the process with the limbs, becoming more efficient with time. There were legends about dead dragons returning to life overnight, and even if he didn't believe them, he kept the sliced up parts in separate rooms, just in case. The stench was appalling. Surveying the body parts strewn about the place, and the surfaces slick with blood, it occurred to him that he should now rescue the princess. She would see him covered in gore, which would probably be unpleasant for her. And perhaps she would smell him, too. His hands began to tremble, and he decided to first arrange and then rearrange the dragon's body parts in a more orderly fashion. moving back and forth between a few rooms. This took quite a while. Eventually, he heard a woman's increasingly insistent cries. It was time to rescue the princess. He followed the sound of her lamentations down the hall to a grand chamber filled with treasure. It glittered impressively in the torchlight. As he entered the room, the princess's voice asked Backbreaker, very loudly, if he planned to starve her to death. Then Sir Reginald rounded the massive treasure pile and she came into view, sitting on the floor of an oversized bird cage, an obese, red-headed woman in a tattered emerald dress. Starving her to death would take quite some time. Saying so would likely be unwise. The princess shrieked in shock at seeing him. "Who are you?" she asked. "I'm here to rescue you," said Sir Reginald. "Well, what are you doing standing around then?" asked the princess. "Hurry up and get this door open. Do you have keys? What are you going to do, pull the bars apart with your bare hands, moron? The dragon is going to eat you." Sir Reginald searched around the hall looking for keys. The princess had no idea where the keys were, and directed a torrent of abuse at Sir Reginald for not being better prepared for the rescue. She also pointed out the disgusting state of his clothing. Those comments were warranted in his opinion. He was in a disgusting state. How had Backbreaker managed to manipulate the keys himself with his gigantic claws? Did he force the princess to lock herself in the cage? Probably not the best time to ask. "I just don't understand," said the princess. "Where is Backbreaker? Did he fly away somewhere without feeding me first? He's never done that before. And what is that smell? It's like a whole herd of cows died in here. Did you walk in here from a pig farm or something?" "You don't have to worry about Backbreaker coming back," said Sir Reginald. The princess sat quietly for a moment and stared at him. "Are you telling me that your master killed Backbreaker? Is that what I am smelling right now?" "Yes," said Sir Reginald. "I mean, no, not exactly. That is what you are smelling, yes." "Perhaps you should tell me what's going on instead of talking to me like you're an idiot," said the princess. This kind of language was to be expected, of course, because the princess was in shock. "Backbreaker is dead," said Sir Reginald. A bit of silence, then she squinted at him and bit her lower lip as a glimmer of understanding crossed her face. "You? So you're a prince? Why are you dressed like a servant? Where is your armor? Where is your sword?" I am not a prince," said Sir Reginald. "So it was your master that killed him?" asked the princess. "I should tell him that you were slandering his good name with your stupidity, claiming his glory. Why doesn't your master come to the great room to rescue me himself? Am I not a fair enough prize for him?" "My lady, your fairness is legendary. He would be... I would be... I think I've had enough of this conversation," said the princess. Sir Reginald left the grand chamber to find a suitable lever to pry open the cage and formulate his next few sentences. "My lady, I am your savior, promised your hand in marriage by your father, his majesty the king." No. "Dearest Mireille, I may look like a servant covered head to toe in filth, but I will always be your knight in shining armor. On the inside." No. "Princess, your father sent a battalion of princes and dukes to save you, but Backbreaker destroyed them all. It was left to me, and my dearest reward is to be at your service for the rest of your years." Stilted, too stilted. He eventually returned from one of the smaller treasure rooms with a scepter that he could use to pry open the cage door. The princess was very upset that he had not thought to bring her something to eat. This was an entirely reasonable point, so he left again. He went to the pantry to find some food that he had not made putrid in the process of butchering the dragon. This time he brought some wine with him, in addition to some fine-looking fruit, which pleased the princess. He managed to blurt out a few coherent sentences while she ate. "I am your true rescuer. I killed the dragon, but to do it I had to sneak in disguised as one of the servants who brings you your food. I watched him eat the other servant." It seemed that now she wouldn't look at him. "And you are not a prince?" "No, my lady." "Because the princes all died trying to save me?" "Yes, my lady." "And we are to be wed?" "Yes, my lady." "I'm sorry I spoke to you so harshly," said Mireille. "I am mortified at myself." "Don't be so hard on yourself, my lady. This is a difficult situation." The cage proved to be remarkably well built, with an unbreakable lock. It would take a significant amount of time to pry the bars open wide enough to allow the princess's ample body to pass through. It was exhausting, awkward work, and its slowness made Sir Reginald look incompetent. While he worked, the princess told the story of her first ball. Due to his concentration on the task, Sir Reginald did not catch all of it. It involved meeting a young prince who was subsequently married off to someone else, but died before his wedding day of a summer cold. Murray was moved to tears at the thought of it. She recovered quickly enough and talked about dancing in the royal ballroom, playing hide and seek in the royal gardens, setting off flying lanterns at night. Then she talked about her beautiful dresses and started crying again. Sir Reginald almost felt that he would cry himself. The scepter appeared to be bending more than the cage bars. "It never occurred to me that I might marry a duke," said Murray. "I am the eldest daughter, after all, so the thought never really crossed my mind." Was now the time to explain that all the interested dukes were dead? Probably not. "Do you know that I must have met you already at one of the balls? I don't remember you at all. I must have ignored you solely because you weren't a prince. I'm so sorry to have treated you the way I have. I'm embarrassed to ask you your name." Sir Reginald had definitely not met her at any of the balls. "Sir Reginald of Lutham." "Sir Reginald of Lutham. I have been gone for so long that I have entirely forgotten where the Duchy of Lutham is. But no matter, you are my prince. You are a prince among men, the only one to kill Backbreaker. And look at me. Look at your princess. Your prize you have won." Murray sobbed for a long time. Perhaps Sir Reginald could run out of the room to fetch something to help with the bars. No, not a good idea. He continued prying in silence. "I'm sorry that I can't spring you out of this cage sooner, my princess. These bars are very well made. You won't even say anything about your prize? Do you remember my beautiful dresses, the most expensive and most beautiful in all the land? And now I wear these tatters that don't even fit my huge body." Sir Reginald looked at Murray, blinking. "Look at me. When I was a girl, a man could grab my waist with 2 hands and touch his fingers and thumbs together. Now look." Certainly he could touch his hands together if he grabbed her around the waist. Granted, he would have to use his arms and not just his hands. And perhaps his thumbs might not touch, but only his fingertips? Nonsense, they would surely touch. She wasn't that big. "My lady, you have just been deprived of the sunlight for so long, it's no wonder that your figure has been somewhat affected. It's nothing that a little horse riding in the countryside won't fix." "I don't think we'll have time for riding horses in the countryside," said the princess. "The summer ball circuit must be starting soon in the capital, so we have to go there directly." "We will return directly to the capital, of course," said Sir Reginald. "But we won't stay long after the wedding. I have my duties to attend to on the march." "What duties do you have on the march? Do you have to patrol like a mere knight?" "Yes, my lady." They looked at each other in the eyes, perhaps a little too long for comfort. Perhaps now she understood, so that he did not have to tell her of his low station directly. She'd suffered enough upset for one day. Eventually, he manhandled the bars open to the point that she could be pulled through them, with the aid of a little grease from the kitchen. Adding grease to her dress did not please her, despite its already sorry state. They found the horse where he had left it, still tied to its hitching post and harnessed to the wagon that had carried her latest supply of food. Sir Reginald stocked the wagon with his keepsakes and a bit of wine and bread for the road. Given her weakened state, the two of them struggled mightily to get her up in the saddle. He had little choice but to push her on the rump during this process, which felt like an indignity for both of them. The horse seemed none too happy to have a new rider. Regardless of the difficulties, they were on their way to the capital soon enough, leaving the stench and misery of Backbreaker's mine behind them. The sun shone, the birds sang, and Sir Reginald walked alongside Murray, leading the horse and speaking of the country village of Lutham, his home. He told her about the 4-room manor house that the two of them would occupy, and the lands near the river Luth that they would be able to purchase with her dowry. He made sure to mention the room where she could weave cloth using his mother's loom, and went over not only the layout of the kitchen, but also the garden and the types of grains, fruits, and vegetables that could be easily bought in the county market, a half-day's ride from Lutham. For her entertainment, he gave a thumbnail sketch of the various neighbors. In her rapt attention, she said nothing. Fearing that her interest in such practicalities might flag over time, He changed the subject to something more rousing: the strategies of the armies of the Marchlands. He described some of his most interesting border patrols with the other Knights of the March, sketched out his daily training regimen, and explained the difficulties of transforming simple peasants into an effective military force. This made him think of what he had learned from Backbreaker, so he explained the tactics of the troops that had tried and failed to rescue her, and then the ways that Backbreaker would defeat them: swooping, lying in wait, picking up two knights and smashing them against one another to kill them, then dropping them from a great height to crash like bombs amongst their allies. At this point, Sir Reginald heard the princess quietly sobbing, and he switched hands so that he could pat her back with one hand and hold the reins with the other. It was an amazing feeling to be with a woman so grateful and happy to finally be free that it brought her to tears.